we're going to have a co-presentation that's being done by Daniel Gray, the CRO at 1 Hour Translations, and Daniel Italiaander, the VP of Operations at 1 Hour Translations. So they're going to be presenting the API-driven translation workflows. There we go. Daniel Gray's coming in. And Daniel Italiaander. All right. Hi, Daniel.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Fine, thanks. How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. And hello, Daniel.
Hi, how are you?
All right, thanks. I appreciate the fact that you guys have the same name, so I can't screw it up. Very, very kind of you. And I haven't seen you guys present before. Is this the first time that you're doing a co-presentation?
It is.
Excellent. We're looking forward to it. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. I don't know if it's a good cop, bad cop type of scenario, but I'll let you present. And again, we'll come in towards the end of the presentation and we'll field some questions for you. Very good.
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes. Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Excellent.
Over to you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So, hi, everybody. I'm Daniel Italiaander, VP of Operations at 1 Hour Translation. I'm based out of Tel Aviv. And today, the two Daniels will speak about the APIs and how they can be leveraged in the localization industry. First, I'll speak a little bit about what APIs actually are and go over a few milestones in the development of those APIs. I myself come from the fintech industry, financial technology industry. I'll give a few examples of how APIs really catapulted that industry forward, and then we'll share our vision of how APIs can be leveraged in the localization industry. So first, a few words about APIs in general. So API, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And essentially an API allows systems to talk with one another. It's a handshake between two systems that allow systems to exchange information, even give instructions to one another. The concept of APIs has been around a long time already, but only in the last decade or so, a tremendous explosion took place around its usage. And really, it became a source of revenue and a business model on and of itself. So if we're looking at the development of the API, it really started in the beginning of the 2000s with 3 commercial companies that started publishing their APIs, starting with Salesforce, who has been using their APIs as a fundamental part of their business from day one. Another company that in the context of APIs needs to be mentioned is eBay, which also rolled out their API in the beginning of 2000s, first only to a select number of licensed eBay partners and developers, but ultimately it became the standard way of how their goods are sold on the web. And we cannot get around, obviously, Amazon. They also published soon in 2000 their API, which allowed developers to incorporate Amazon content and features into their own websites. The second wave of development took place in the mid-2000s when the big social giants really adopted the APIs, starting with Flickr in 2004, and then followed in 2006 by Facebook and Twitter. And they really used also APIs really as a source of revenue. Now, as I said, I come from the financial technology world, a company called Payoneer that allows vendors and sellers all over the world to receive their funds, their payments frictionless. Actually, a lot of 1 Hour Translation translators are getting paid via Payoneer as well. Two examples that I've seen during my career that really catapulted that forward was the API integration between Payoneer and the accounting and bookkeeping software. So what it allowed was previously when a company approved a payment in an accounting or booking system, then that same company needed to go to the bank or to actually make that payment. With an API integration, it was now possible to approve that payment in the accounting or bookkeeping system and immediately have that payment executed on the Payoneer platform. And another example from that world is a place where an integration between banks and the digital wallet of Payoneer, allowing really funds to flow freely between financial products of the banks and the Payoneer digital wallet. So for instance, somebody can have funds on his debit card or credit card or bank account and would like to top up his Payoneer balance, or the other way around, withdraw from Payoneer to the bank. And that all is done with APIs between those systems, allowing for a frictionless flow of funds. So there I've seen firsthand how those APIs really developed that industry very quickly. And I believe that in the localization industry, there are also many examples, scenarios and ways in which we can leverage those APIs to really, move further, facilitate the flows. So for instance, there are two examples that I wanted to bring in particular. One are smart quotes. So we are working towards a way whereby we envision getting materials from our clients via API, send that to translation memory analysis, and based on the leverageability of translation memory, in real time, being able to give a quote back to our clients with regard to the cost of that translation. That is a process that today needs many hands and touches many teams. And by leveraging the API, we believe we can reach a lot more efficiency in that flow. And another example of the API in the localization industry is an integration. That's something that we actually have and further develop, is integration with help desk software, for instance, Zendesk. So we are now able to get support tickets that are in a foreign language from Zendesk via API submitted to us, distributed to our translators, translated, and then being sent back via API to that same help desk software, allowing our clients to do business globally and give support to all their clients wherever they are in the world. So that's a little bit of an idea of APIs in general, how we envision that in terms of operation. And Daniel, maybe you can take it from there and share your vision as well.
Thanks, Daniel. So just by way of introduction, my name is Daniel Gray, and I've been fortunate enough to be in the industry, in the localization industry, for I think about 20 some odd years. What I love about this concept of API-driven workflows is, for a lot of folks that are listening either real time or might listen to the recording, you're either on the customer side or the supplier side, and our conversation today is really to share our learnings with both sides of the fence. And the slide that I'm sharing is really about, as Daniel was talking about, it's really about engagement models. How do we make it easy for customers to interact with us as suppliers? For 1 hour translation, we have a couple of different engagement models. One engagement model is self-service, which is really nice. It's kind of like shopping on Amazon.com, where you can basically just self-serve for the procurement of localization or translation services. I like thinking about it in terms of evolution is translation as a utility, kind of like cloud computing. So the concept of engagement models, I think, is really what underscores this concept of API-driven workflows. For 1 hour translation, the ability for a customer to use different engagement models. One engagement model can be self-service. Another engagement model can be somewhat of the traditional project manager to project manager engagement. What we are finding, however, at the smaller side of the fence to the larger side, enterprise side of the spectrum, is the concept of setting up an API-driven workflow. That setup, once done, it allows for velocity and scale, unlike anything or any other option. Even the use of translation management systems, we are also integrating with multiple translation management systems from an API perspective. In other words, if you set up the tracks and you set up the right workflow, and the next slide will illustrate an example of that workflow. Once you set up that workflow, in terms of an API call and moving content from the customer side through to the translation and production side, and then back to the customer, what we're finding is massive improvements in efficiencies from a velocity or production perspective, cost efficiencies, and I'll talk a little bit about both the benefits to a customer as well as the benefits to a supplier. Now, I don't think the concept of API-driven workflows is all that tectonic. Nevertheless, what we are finding is from small customer to medium to large customer, the concept of setting up an API-driven workflow on the supplier side creates stickiness. On the customer side, just makes it a lot easier and faster and less human hands on the assembly line to move translation content from the customer through the translation production assembly line and then back to the customer. So again, I think the big takeaway from this slide for the audience, be it that you're on the customer side or the supplier side, is there are benefits to both sides. And most importantly, providing different engagement models for customers, be it self-service, project manager to project manager, API, or a combination thereof. And we actually have customers that vacillate between those engagement models, being able to do self-service for translation as a utility, and for much larger engagements, being able to move content through an API-driven workflow. So with that said, let's take a look at an example API-driven localization workflow. Before I go in and make some call outs on this workflow, this is a representative workflow. It's semi-generic and it's used for illustrative purposes, but it's a good example of how we work with our customers to custom build or custom set up the workflow. You can see that there are 3 swim lanes from the client to the localization production to quality assurance as 3 basic swim lanes. But the nice thing about this workflow is it is custom set up with the client. Number 2, being able to go into the workflow and triage any challenges that are coming up with production. I'm going to make a couple of call outs as this slide builds. But what I have found, both from a sales point of view, a customer service and support point of view, is documenting the workflow is really a simple and yet eye-opening experience, both for the customer as well as for the supplier. I personally use this artifact with my customer and with my operations team. And the concept is anytime I might have a problem on the assembly line, I'm actually troubleshooting the problem and isolating the problem or the challenge to a step or set of steps on the workflow. And then I can go in and, like a series of levers, make modifications to the workflow, which may be talent related, it may be process related, it may be system or technology related, but it's allowing us to more quickly triage, identify, isolate problem areas, be it I'm getting bad feedback on linguistic quality, or I'm having a turnaround time challenge. Usually it makes it so much easier to triage, troubleshoot, identify, isolate the challenge on the assembly line by having the workflow document. So let's build this slide and just to make a couple of call outs. And I'm guessing that for the suppliers on the call, a lot of this is possibly what you do. And for customers, maybe this is also what you experience. But the first thing I would call out is, as a supplier, we have a talent pool around the world. Beyond that talent pool, which we certify, one of the nice things that we try to do is then further go from the certified meta talent pool to a badged set of workers that are account specific. We have found that that has been extremely helpful. We are able to tie production and deliverables to talent ID. So now I can actually identify, do I have a talent issue? Because my deliverable is paired with the talent that actually worked on that deliverable. And then on the upside is production team consistency, account knowledge, improved productivity, because now I have a set of quote unquote badged workers or translators or other talent that is dedicated to that account. So that's one of the advantages of setting up that API workflow, badging the talent, and pairing the talent to the workflow. Next is in terms of linguistic sign-off. And one of the big things that I'm a proponent of here at 1 Hour Translation and in general is, what is the ruler that we are using, if we use the metaphorical ruler, how do we measure quality? One of the things that we are doing is making sure that with our customers, the ruler that we use to measure quality and the ruler the customer uses to measure quality is one and the same. But again, with the API-driven workflow, we are auto-routing localized content to the QA swim lane or the QA step. We are doing statistical sampling of each translator's IDs deliverable that go through QA. So once again, I may not do 100% QA of 100% of the content, but I'm doing a significant amount of statistical sampling of deliverables per translator ID and therefore for the totality of the team, because I'm trying to rate both my talent in that API-driven workflow as well as rate the quality of the deliverable performance and deliverables being made to the customer. So now I can actually measure translator performance as well as I can measure total deliverable performance. So that's a big one in my opinion, in my experience, is how do you get that ruler normalized from the supplier to the customer? And then how do you lift performance metrics off the assembly line and not only share them with the customer, but be able to condition, train, incent the translation talent that's working on the workflow? How do you incent them to either perform better, if not reward them for overperformance? So I've already mentioned the concept of normalizing that ruler. I've mentioned the concept of reportable and trackable performance coming off the assembly line. But even more than that, especially as suppliers, we want to get to either monthly or quarterly business reviews, being able to report back KPIs or key performance indicators to the customer on how we're performing, being able to provide metrics by language, by deliverable, and by translator. We have found that level of ownership and accountability has been wonderful for us as a provider, as a factory, and for the customer in order to enable the customer to better understand their ROI, be able to report internally and up to their stakeholders on their multi-market performance. So this is paying significant dividends for us. And I have really enjoyed working with customers, setting up these API workflows, the velocity, the scale that's going through. Another big call out is we're actually doing more volume with technically less human hands on the assembly line than when I started back in the industry 20 some odd years ago, where there were armies of project managers and project coordinators. Just a lot of this stuff was managed manually. Excel file tracking, FTP handoffs, email. It was really interesting time. Today, what I'm finding, if I just do a juxtaposition and compare the before and after, the amount of volume and velocity that's going through for localization is happening far greater than anything I ever worked on in the past, and yet with less human hands on the assembly line. Less human hands means less cost and less human error possible on the assembly line. It's not perfect, but boy, have we seen an improvement. And so I will finish with some highlights that I think are helpful, both from a customer side or customer point of view, as well as from a supplier point of view. So I chose to highlight, of course, some really impressive metrics. What I'd like to share, contextualize here for the audience is 1 Hour Translation, which is about 12 years old, was born as a digital company offering a platform for self-service translation. So you do have a lot of customers that have smaller translation requirements, faster turnarounds, smaller volumes, and that is great for the self-service side. As far as the API side, even with very large engagements that can still come through in smaller packages, the nice thing is scale. So for customers, you can move a lot of small packages, very medium or large packages through an API-driven workflow. But for us, a highlight, a showcase of this is processing a particular project that was 2 million words across 6 language pairs. And this was done in a 90-day period. Now, again, with the advent of machine translation, be it post-editing light, post-editing full, of course, we're producing, again, a lot more throughput than we did, again, in the past. But what's amazing is those tracks, that pipeline between customer and supplier is facilitating, right, is making it easier to move the content from customer to supplier through the factory and then back to the customer. In terms of cost efficiency, on the supplier side, we are seeing massive improvements in costs. Less human hands on the assembly line means less cost. So we are seeing, from a cost overhead perspective, massive improvements in our cost efficiency. And I think that those improvements for us, they are passed on to the customer. As far as operational efficiency is concerned, as I mentioned, 1 hour translation, to give you a sense, is about 100 full-time employees, of course, operating with a very large global certified pool of talent. But nevertheless, operationally, we are pushing millions and millions of words, or able to push millions and millions of words through the factory because the API workflow sets up those tracks or that pipeline, and then it becomes almost a wash, rinse, repeat. As far as quality is concerned, what I love is being able to move from subjective to objective quality measurement. And so be it the scale 1 to 5, 1 to 6, and setting up that framework with the customer on how you're going to measure quality, what's working well for us is getting to a normalized or standardized ruler and being synchronized with the customer on how we're measuring quality and how they're measuring quality. Once we get to that, if we decide collaboratively that that pass threshold is a 4, well, in this case, with this particular customer, we're achieving a 4 to a 5. That doesn't mean that we don't deliver below a 4. When we do, once again, you can get back to the workflow and troubleshoot that and identify, do you have a talent issue, a systems issue, a process issue. Lastly, and I'll finish on this point and then we can open it up for questions, but the basic concept is automate, route, deliver, and report. And I love the concept of wash, rinse, repeat. We make it predictable. We make it easy on the customer. Some of our customers have one API. Some of our customers have multiple APIs. But all in all, I think that there is a benefit to the supplier ecosystem as well as the customer ecosystem. So I want to thank everybody for spending a little bit of time with us. Brian, over to you for questions.
Yeah, thank you to both Daniels. I really appreciate the all the information. It was wonderful. Naturally, as these presentations do, especially when we talk about APIs, there are questions. So the first one that was from Eva. How do you guarantee 1 hour translations? Is it limited to a certain volume and office hours? Are there translations provided by in-house translators or MT?
So it's a great question, Daniel. I'll take a first stab at that and then you can feel free to comment. So again, one of the things that 1 hour translation was born on was this digital platform of making translation, the consumption of translation, into utility and self-service. So granted, you can't push a couple million words in through 1 hour translation, or I don't think any supplier in 1 hour. But the basic concept is for very small packages, yes, we use both in-house as well as external translators, just like most, if not the entire industry, leverages that. And yes, we are kind of like Amazon. There are basic thresholds for same-day delivery, next-day delivery, 2-day delivery. And then lastly, production methodologies. We use a combination of either human translation, machine translation raw, machine translation heavy or light. So that really depends on the quality threshold that the customer needs. Some customers are okay with just raw MT, depending on what they're doing with the content. Others need the highest of quality. So we pair the production methodology to the quality output. And I think that's really the key there. Daniel, I don't know if you have anything additional you want to add.
No, okay.
No,
I was going to say you're muted.
You. Yeah, no,
Daniel,
thank you. That was
great. And if Daniel, if you could mind just stop sharing your screen, I'd appreciate it, just so everybody can see the, who's answering the questions. That'd be very kind. Thank you very much. We also have another question from Santiago Torres. Can you give a few examples of some of the LQA metrics you use?
Daniel, would you like to take a stab, or I can go ahead and take on from that one first? I'll take that one first, Brian.
All right.
So there are some standard frameworks that we have used with our customers. I'd be actually happy to share that, Brian, with you guys, and then maybe be able to share it with the community.
Thank you. Wow.
But to keep the response short and sweet, we try and use standard frameworks. So from spilling to style to tonality, technical accuracy, those kind of categories, and then a rating of say 1 to 5 or 1 to 6. It allows us, in Daniel's managing the factory, it allows us to pull those performance metrics off the assembly line and be able to report those performance metrics. What is key here is making sure that we're aligned with the customer. I have found too many times the way the customer's ICR in-country review, the ruler that they use is different than the ruler that we're using. So one of the first things I do is make sure we're normalizing that ruler so that when we report a 4.5, it's the same thing as the customer. I think it's less important to me what the framework is, what are the categories and what's the scoring. Once you normalize on that, you know, it works well. When you're not normalized on that, my 4.5 could be a customer's 3.2 or vice versa.
Great. I think that's a great point. I think a lot of people fail to realize that to normalizing that across, you know, into the in-country reviewers is so important in terms of maintaining the customer feedback and actually using it, you know, effectively. So thank you for that. One additional question, which is more related to the criteria for the customers themselves, but can you give some examples of the quality criteria your customers agree to?
Yeah. So once again, it ends up falling into this, let's call it semi-standardized structure of spelling, grammar, style, tonality, technical accuracy, etc. Our customers, even Fortune 500 customers, and with a lot of experience in localization, are still coming to us, and I'm sure they come to other suppliers, asking, well, what should our ruler look like? So what I have found, Brian, and I certainly welcome Daniel to comment as well, but I have found I will come to the table and share with the customer what has worked for us, what the industry uses as an average, but from customer to customer, it has changed. The nice thing with us as a supplier, I'm sure the same for other suppliers, is we do try and be as customer focused and customized as possible. So there's no one silver bullet, but there is kind of a baseline or nucleus that we work from. And then there's a little bit of modification. Now, I would say that what I have also found is one customer's threshold for passing could be a 3 or 3.5, and another customer's threshold for passing is 5 or nothing. So it differs. It differs from customer to customer and content category to content category. But once again, there's this kind of base framework, and I'd be happy to share what we use. I'd also be happy to hear from others what they use.
Great.
Maybe I
Thank you.
can add to that one
Please.
type of customer adjustment that we do in terms of quality measurement is the sampling rate. So we have a certain sampling rate to guarantee the quality of our factory, so to speak. But then there are clients that require a higher level of sampling, and that is something that we can facilitate and do facilitate.
Great. Thank you very much. We're at time, but I do want to invite you guys to check out the community afterwards, because I know that some people are going to be asking some additional questions because we didn't get to all of them, unfortunately. So we even have people asking if they can reach out to you, the Daniels, directly to ask questions about APIs and whatnot. So again, I'd like to really thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate all the information, the transparency in which you spoke. It's very kind of you, and very much appreciated that you spent time with us today. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.